It is February 21st, 2016, and I am in Budapest, Hungary. Approximately 6,000 migrants were picked up by the European border guards just during the past 3 days off the Aegean Sea, off the coast of Turkey, and transported directly into the Greek islands. In the Greek islands, these migrants, who are basically a hodgepodge of peoples from the Middle East, but also from North Africa, the rest of Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Afghanistan. Basically, every failed society on the face of the earth is well represented in these flows into Europe. In the Greek islands, these migrants are now being fingerprinted. There is at least an attempt now to establish their identities. Before, the policy was just to wave them through, which of course gave us the Paris massacres. But now they're at least being fingerprinted in a half-hearted attempt to deter ISIS and other terrorist groups from mingling among these migrants. And then after that is done, these migrants are transported through ferries designed for the transportation of vehicles, but that are now being used for the transportation of thousands of people. They're being transported at the expense of the Greek government, but thanks to a subsidy from the European Union, in these ferries into Athens. From Athens, these migrants take the train to Macedonia, or the bus to Macedonia. In Macedonia, they are provided special trains that take them all across the Balkan route into Austria. In special trains provided to them, again at no expense to them. Now, the Austrian government recently implemented caps on the number of asylum applications that the Austrians would consider in a single day. So the cap is now at 80 applications per day. However, the Austrian government is not having a similarly low restriction on the number of migrants that are allowed to transit through their territories. That number is 3,200. Angela Merkel, the Chancellor of Germany, which is the primary destination for all these migrants, is furious about this. Not because there is a quota of daily migrants allowed to transit through Austria into Germany that is so high, but because in her estimation there should be no caps and no restrictions at all. So if 15,000 migrants want to come into Germany in a single day, as happened in September of last year, that is what should be allowed to happen. Angela Merkel believes that at 3,200 migrants, which is approximately 1 million migrants a year, Germany will not achieve the diversification of its demographics in a sufficiently speedy way to satisfy her predilections. Because last year we had about 1 million migrants coming into Germany, primarily young males between the ages of 18 to 30. So if you break down the German population by age groups, the ethnic replacement of German males by Arab males by black males is very, very quick. But Angela Merkel feels that it is not quick enough, because Angela Merkel has problems with her own population, with the German population. This has to do, I suppose, with the history of Germany and her feelings towards that history. Despite the fact that most Germans were not even alive during World War II, including Angela Merkel, Angela Merkel feels that given the scope of the crimes committed by Germans during World War II, the Germans are not fit to inhabit their own country and should be expeditiously replaced by other ethnic groups. And she did a very thorough effort in that regard last year, and she wants to ensure that an effort of corresponding or greater scale is again implemented this year. Now, if you live in Germany and you oppose her policies and you don't step into the program of ethnic replacement of Germans by people from other parts of the world, then the consequences to you can be quite severe. We're talking about, at the very least, your Facebook account will be shut down. I mean, that's a given. If you say anything, if you point out any unflattering truth about immigration. But more serious consequences can attach, such as, for example, you may lose your job, or a criminal investigation may be opened up, which can lead to fines or prison time. Because the problem is that if you point out unflattering truths about migrants, you are touching a raw nerve. For the simple reason that political liberals such as Angela Merkel are being eaten alive by cognitive dissonance. There is a structural flaw in their ideology. Their ideology does not correspond to the physical world, to physical reality, to the natural world. In the natural world, the races are not equal. Groups of individuals from different regions of the world, or originating from different regions of the world, or historically originating from different regions of the world, are not the same. There's no reason for them to be the same, and they're in fact not the same. They differ by any number of measures. They differ culturally, of course, but they also differ in their aptitudes, predilections, predispositions, their crime rates, their levels of economic achievement, their levels of academic achievement. And that's just the way the world is. And liberals may have control over what you say, but they do not have control over the real world. They do not have any influence over the natural world any more than you can change the color of the sky by describing that color as this color as opposed to some other color. And the issue is very curious, because if you look at the United States or any other multicultural society, but let's talk about right now about the United States. Liberals start with the concept of racial equality, and they end up with racial preferences, and they end up with racial classifications for purposes of affirmative action, etc. Because it just so happens that these migrants and these people of dark skin, they more often than not replicate the same circumstances that they flee from or that are common in societies where these individuals reside. Because people don't stop being who they are just by virtue of transporting themselves into another country. So, what these migrants are escaping from in their own societies, it just so happens that they bring with themselves. Now, the ethnic transformation of Europe has become a focus of quote-unquote civil rights groups for a reason that has to do with that structural flaw of liberalism. That structural flaw would seem to indicate that these migrants who have control over the bulk of the Earth's landmass do not need to come to Europe, because the societies that they themselves develop and create should be more or less equivalent to the ones that exist in Europe. Except that, of course, this is clearly not the case. So they leave, they come to Europe to find that which is missing in their societies, and that which is missing in their societies is, of course, the presence of Europeans. But when they're here, they're going to have problems, because that's what happens all the time. And the prisons are going to fill up with people like them. And ghettos are going to form. And the local culture of Europe is going to be degraded. The cities are going to go to hell in a handbasket. Why am I saying this? Because it is what happens time and again. Now, what does that tell you about immigration? It can tell you one thing, that it is not in the interest of Europeans. It's not in the interest of Europeans to see their countries being taken over by people who are completely alien to Europe.